What's going on, everybody? Cody from MotorcycleMD. Welcome to part 2 of a 2-part series of videos where I talk about wiring, splicing in, soldering in, using heat shrink, bullet connectors, all different types of tools and techniques that I use in the field daily. Okay, this is part 2, so if you've not watched part 1, make sure you go back and check that. I'll make sure to put a little link here as a card for you to go and check it out. That will kind of help cater to this video when it comes to bullet connectors, soldering those connectors, or making your own personal installation for the connectors that you want to make. One thing I'll hit on before we begin that was made very clear to me when, without obvious care, I threw around the sentence saying that I don't care, heat shrink is heat shrink. Obviously, there's always good, better, and best stuff when it comes to what you're buying. Tools, equipment, it doesn't matter. There's always something better out there than what you have or what you bought. With that being said, there's obviously better stuff out there than any old heat shrink around in your garage. There are different styles, different chemical compounds, all different types of stuff that can go into heat shrink tubing. Okay, there are single wall and dual wall heat shrinking. 2-wall or dual wall heat shrink tubing is a phenomenal product. It provides great resistance to a number of outside elements when single wall shrink tubing may not. They also help to adhere to the wire and produce some type of glue can seep out of them, which again helps seal the connection. When it comes to the ratios of the heat shrink, there are different ratios. When I say 2 to 1, 2.5 to 1, 3 to 1, they're saying that shrink tubing has been expanded that many number of times and that when you heat it will return to that smaller number. So when you have 3 to 1, it will shrink 3 times its size into that one final size. I didn't want to get too far into those details, but it is important, so now you have that information. One new thing that we'll hit on in this video is when it comes to tinning wires to connectors. Tinning itself can have a couple of different purposes for the word. They sell connectors that are tinned. They sell tinned brass connectors, like a coating that they put over it. Tinned connectors can have a much higher resistance to corrosion, deterioration in those moisture style of situations that they're in. It can just be used better in the application when it comes to your wiring. A tinned connector. Tinning can also mean when you're tinning a wire to an object. Like for the connector, we're going to melt solder into the wire on the connector. In the video, I may have detailed that it's a tinned connector, so it has this purpose, which may not be absolutely correct, but I think you guys are going to get the idea. I'm going to show you what that looks like when it comes to really allowing that connection to have the best opportunity of life throughout its years of use. So, alright, sweet. So now we got 2 more options. Let's say we need to take that one wire and put a quick disconnect bullet connector on it. I love using bullet connectors. I think they look the best. They oftentimes come with some really nice weather stripping or protective shield that makes it a little bit more resistant to water and all the elements. So I have a couple of sets of different stuff. I have a nice Honda set that I feel like the installation is a little bit better. This is a really cheap set that I got, I think, off of Amazon again, that I would use because it's decent. This is, I don't know, it's definitely from overseas. But the weather resistant insulation that you can put around the bullet connectors, it's not as thin as you find in really cheap stuff. This stuff's kind of thick, and that's what I like to have. So often you'll see 2 different insulators. You'll see a long one and a short one. Okay, try to save the long ones for your female ends. That being your female end because it has a hole. And use the shorter insulation for the male end because it's a male end. But I'll also show you guys tricks. Let's say you don't have these, but you do have some type of male-female bullet connector. I'll show you guys what to do if you do not have this type of insulator. Even though this stuff's the best stuff, I'll show you guys another trick. Okay, so pretty straightforward on installing this type of stuff. Cut back a little bit on the wire. Twist these up a little bit. Let's go ahead and install. We'll say this is going to be a female end. Hopefully the wire is long enough, and it is. Awesome. So on the female end, you always need to make sure that the bottom 2 feet are going to loop around the insulation, okay? It can't be up here on the wire. It's not going to last, and it's probably going to rip right off the first time you disconnect that wire. It has to be back here on the insulation. No ifs, ands, or buts, alright? And don't send the wire too far up into the hole, because then it will not allow our male connector to sit in as far as it needs to, because you have wire that's way too far in there. Okay, so find a happy medium. Try to allow the wire to end right where the second pair of feet are on this. This one I would consider too long. And one more note, oftentimes the LED lights that you're dealing with have extremely small wire, and these bullet connectors don't even fit on them because the wire is so small. Strip back quite a bit, maybe about an inch amount on the wire, twist it up real tight, and start to fold it. Fold it all the way in until you can get all the way back, and then loop it onto the insulation of that wire. Then grab onto both the wire and the insulation on both of them when you're using that really small wire. You'll kind of bulk up the end of it, and it'll make a good connection, and this will hold nice and tight to it. It's just a little trick when it comes to really, really thin wire. Alright, so crimpers are a little bit different tool. Okay, see it has almost like a W built into it, and that's to help the feet on those connectors kind of loop around and hook back into themselves and dig into that insulation. They have certain sizes for certain ones. We'll be hanging out in this area. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and install my female connector. Make sure I got enough meat for the first bottom feet to hold on to. I'm going to crimp the wire section first. Find the right section on my crimpers. Kind of hit right in the center of those 2 feet. And if you have really nice bullet connectors, they're not going to be super flimsy and soft, and they'll curl in pretty nice. Don't try to cut the wire in half. Just go until you see the feet hook in, and really try to clamp onto that wire, okay? Sometimes, alright, so I'll kind of take these 2 feet, bend them in a little bit. Same section of the crimpers. Try to keep them nice and even. And right in the center. Don't need to cut the wire in half and apply full force. Just make it nice and even. That is perfect. Okay, kind of loops back and doubles into that insulation to kind of hold on to it. Alright, we take our insulator and just work this all the way up until we hear like a little snap. And that will cover it up. So with these cheaper ones, you'll find that it kind of ends. I mean, it definitely protrudes past the connector, but this is what the cheaper stuff does. It's just shorter. I have other stuff like these from Honda, which actually have Honda part numbers on them, and you'll see that they are definitely longer than these ones and a lot denser than these ones are. But that's what you get. I'll definitely have the part numbers for the nice Honda ones down in the description. I love these ones. I just don't want to waste them. I love them so much. They're kind of pricey, by the way, too. Alright, but let's say you don't have this insulation, but you want to make a nice connector. Okay? That's somewhat resistant to the weather. So, we can use heat shrink. Remember that technique I did where I stacked these on top of each other? Same technique. Alright? So I'm going to cut a little piece of the smaller insulation, smaller heat shrink. I didn't really give myself a lot of wire to work with on here, so bear with me. I'm going to go ahead and slip my smaller insulation down first, and then install my female connector. Kind of slide that up onto that first part of it. Okay, which was already pretty tight. Little shrink action. Wait for it to cool down, because if I slip the second piece over top of it, then it's gonna start shrinking automatically. So I gotta wait for it to cool down a little bit. Alright, then we can take a larger piece of insulation that fits around it. And we're going to take this and kind of find where that first insulation ends. Okay, but we're going to extend this out a little bit. So that's where the end of the bullet connector is. We're going to extend this out just a little bit. Okay, so there's our female connector. We're going to go in just till we're just over it. And now we're going to work on heating just this end. But a little bit of heat at a time, you'll see where it's at. And now we've covered it up, and we still have that little pocket for our, that is an ugly crimp gone wrong. Trying to make a little male connector and I jacked it all up. But regardless, we've now made a little insulator. We can take our male connector and feed it on in there. Okay, and that does a good job. You know, it's not as good as it could be. What would make it even better is if you, on this end, with some more heat shrink. And then when these go together, you have somewhat of a pretty nice insulated connector. Okay? If you want to heat this up a little bit, you could, and then you can wrap that female end insulation around that. You can pull that apart, now you have a nice insulated connector. Fancy's fancy. Okay, so two different styles of female connectors that you can do. One thing that I did want to show you guys was a tool that you've probably seen before. They kind of look like this, but they have two colored bands and they have a soldered section in the center. Those work really well. I just don't have any with me. Those are really straightforward to use. They work great. They seal great. I love them. You cut the line, strip it back, twist them together. Make sure you have this in line before you twist them together. Then you can just heat this part up and it literally just melts itself onto it and it melts the solder and it works really, really well. I just don't have any with me. So I know about them. I wish I could have showed you guys that, but I just don't have it with me. So anyways, but let's see some uses for this liquid tape. Okay, so let's say we're gonna do something kind of crazy and you're dealing with all different types of weird wiring and you need to make a couple wires jump off of one. That one, strip this up a little bit. I'm going to loop this one into this one. And let's say you forgot to put heat shrink on it. And there's no reason why you should be doing this loop thing I got going on here, but just to show you guys. Okay, so we still want to solder that connection. Obviously, anytime you twist wires together, at least solder them to keep them in there nice and tight. Remember, it is important to go underneath the connection so you can kind of suck all that solder all the way down through into it, not just on top. That one you can see I got real hot on it. I was kind of at a bad angle trying to hold onto the wire and melted up that insulation, but not to fear. So we forgot our heat shrink, right? And we want to make sure it's still going to be a good connection. Liquid tape. Stuff comes out real thick, but it's on a paintbrush. Okay, you can kind of scrape this all off and take this. We're going to paint it onto our connection. Now, what's good about this is that I can fill in this weird little Y joint here. Try to make it as clean as possible. You kind of build it up. Make it look uniform and build up the section that needs it, and then we'll let that dry. Now these are what I don't want to see you use. Okay? These little 3M connectors or whatever they come on, they usually come in with all your aftermarket stuff. They're going to send you these so that you can jump into the wire. Okay? It allows for a closed end, so it does not go all the way through, but then it allows you to take the opposite end and then jump it through a wire, like so. Then they want you to take this metal part, slam that down onto your wires, which has a very high rate of cutting the majority of the wire that you have available. Okay? It literally just cuts straight into the insulation, grabs onto the wire, and you know, sometimes they work great. I've opened up bikes and they have 40 of these all stacked side by side together, which looks so dumb, just asking for a bad connection. Just try to refrain from using these. All the techniques I'm showing you here will keep you from not using these, okay? If you have to, honestly, sometimes these are good to keep in a stash bag on the bike when need be. Let's say you have something that goes out and you need to jump into a wire real quick. Instead of having all of these tools with you, you can just crimp it on real quick. But I don't advise you to do this when you're actually taking your time to do the wiring correctly. Okay, so there's a lot going on here on this wiring. Obviously, hopefully you're not doing anything like this. But once the liquid tape dries, which I've gotten it all over my hand because it's not dry yet, it works really well. You can separate the wires and it's got some flexibility to it. And it's just great for covering up a section that maybe you don't have heat shrink on or you can't get heat shrink on cleanly. Okay, good tool to have. I got one more thing to show you guys. That is a really cool connection that you can think about purchasing if you, let's say you want to take a ground wire and make it available for multiple wires to ground off of. These are really cool connectors that allow for 4 different grounding points. Okay, really 3 additional, but you're going to attach this end to a ground, and these are tinned. They take in heat very well, which means that I can solder the connector to the wiring. It makes a really strong ground. They used to do this on the old vintage stuff. This in particular, shout out to Vintage Connections or Spark Moto. The guys over there, they provide a really quality product. I love using their stuff. There's not really anything on their site I don't like. So that's where I got these from, and I'll show you guys how I use these. So with everything you've learned, you know what I'm going to do now. I'm going to strip this back, okay, twist this up, go ahead and install my insulator that they sell from their store. Really affordable. Going to run this through. This will be my ground wire that I'm working with. Grab my connection, my 3-way female end, and do the exact same technique that I showed you guys before. Sometimes you'll find a connector that's a little bit bigger, like they'll have 3.5 or 4 millimeter or whatever. If you run into where the wire is too small, again with LED stuff for the connector, another trick I like to do is just take the metal section, just do a bend in it. Okay, I'll beefing it up a little bit. That's gonna be a little bit too big for this end here, but just a quick technique for you guys. Same thing. These have a little bit bigger feet on it, so I'm going to start in the middle and just keep working back to front until I get it all to collapse on the wire evenly. Perfect. Now I can take this and solder it. If I wanted to, I could kind of cook that in there a little bit more and allow it to sink in, but that's pretty darn good right there. Okay, now it's a really strong ground connection. I can take my insulation, run this up, completely sealed ground connection to run my male counterpart inside of. Okay, if you want to use, again, insulation like that, it just works really well. I can put 2 more in here and all use the same ground. Awesome connector to have if you plan on putting accessory wires and using grounds from the frame or anything like that. This is not a promo from them. I just love what they offer, and it's great stuff. So that's it, guys. Hope that was helpful. All these tools and techniques I've learned over the years that just work best. And I hope that you find them useful for whatever wiring job you're going to be getting yourself into. Be sure to share the video, like, subscribe. Also, join the mailing list so you get the free troubleshooting cheat sheet that's helping lots of people out. And if you love the content you see here on the YouTube channel, make sure you check out the Inner Circle. I have hours and hours of content that's not shown on here. We have a membership community, private Facebook group where people can ask me questions about their bike and I can help them out. If that's you, check that out. All of that will be in the description below, as well as everything that I used here. Hope you found this video helpful, and I'll see you guys next time. Cody from MotorcycleMD, bringing you guys some quality tricks and tips for your next build or your daily ride. Later.